All right, look at that, it's 5:30. Okay, so the microphones are in addition. So we heard that folks were having a difficult time in the back hearing us. So let us know if the amplification is working. Are we close enough to the microphone? Are you hearing us? Because this is new for all of us. So far, do I get a thumbs up? How about in the back?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, welcome. We're happy to have you all back up with us this evening as we have our third public hearing on our short-term rental ordinance number 84. This evening, we're going to start with presentation from staff regarding the changes that have been made between the prior hearing and this hearing at the direction of the commissioners. We will then take public comment. I will be very clear that we may not get to everyone's public comment tonight because we will be leaving time once again for us to deliberate regarding the ordinance. It is our hope that we will be able to have this be our final hearing. So we do want to hear from people, and I'll give a little more direction when we get to the public comment session. But we are going to start with a presentation from Sarah Absher and Dan Kearns with the information that we changed between the two hearings. So, Sarah, if you'd kick off.
Thank you. Yes, good evening. For the record, my name is Sarah Absher. I'm the Director of the Tillamook County Department of Community Development. And with me is Daniel Kearns, the attorney that was hired by the county to assist with the ordinance update process. So quickly, as we enter into the third reading of the ordinance draft, I'll just quickly go through the highlighted sections of the draft that are a reflection of the direction given by the board from the June 13th hearing. And then also there are some housekeeping matters that Mr. Kearns and I and County Counsel Bill Sargent also worked through, and those are highlighted as well. Those are not substantive changes. With that, Mr. Kearns has continued to work on transfer, ownership, definitions, etc. to meet the intent of the board's desire with direction that was given to us at the June 13th meeting for language to limit ownership of licenses, and then also further with that the refinement of the transferability piece. So to begin, I'm so sorry, let me pull the wrong draft. I had a yellow highlighted copy here, and it is gone.
But here, Bill took it.
Thank you. I was panicking, so I didn't know it was here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so beginning on page 2, the change is to section 24, the removal of established owner occupied, so that it reads livability of neighborhoods. Moving forward to page 4, Mr. Kearns is proposing the removal of letter E, which is the change of property ownership definition, and as mentioned, he will visit with you about that in just a moment. So letter G, contiguous, was added. This was added in relation to the distance and density provisions that the commissioners also gave staff direction to address for concentration of short-term rentals outside of unincorporated communities and urban growth boundaries. Daytime, the definition was moved just to put it in alphabetical order. Page 5, letter R, hosted home share, it's a new definition. Overnight, letter W was also moved so that it's in alphabetical order. Owner, again, that definition has been amended, and Mr. Kearns will visit with you about a proposal for that amendment shortly. Page 6, as discussed in the previous hearing, the definition for a short-term rental, again, has continued to be refined. This is language that we feel is a better fit. Letter GG sub-area, that is in relation to the establishment of caps. It defines the sub-area when we talk about caps later on in the ordinance. Page 7, letter KK, unincorporated communities. Those are also identified and now included in the definitions. And again, that is in relation to the proposal for caps outlined later in the ordinance. Section 40, letter B, limitation on the number of STR licenses per licensee. That language is new to declare that this limitation would apply to new applications, not renewals, and those that are submitted after the effective date of the ordinance. Letter D on page 8, this again has been expanded to include all of the sub areas as defined. And the language that discusses the wait list has also been refined from the last hearing, and that is all captured.
That's ridiculous.
Letter E on page 9, density limits outside of sub-areas. So this is the distance and density. This is where the definition for contiguous comes into play to talk about essentially that there could not be two licensed properties contiguous to one another moving forward. Letter F, renewal eligibility. This is commonly known as the use it or lose it piece that the commissioners directed staff to provide proposed language for, and this includes the 30-day requirement to rent within their anniversary year. And the language here does state that this provision would apply to annual renewals submitted after January 1st, 2024. Page 9 in section 50, the language was slightly modified to where it states, and upon transfer or alteration of an existing STR license. Page 10, letter 7, notice to neighbors, contiguous is proposed to replace the term adjacent. Again, contiguous is defined in the ordinance. Page 11, B2, we added and the county civil enforcement procedures. This includes anything, again, with the STR hearings officer or the county's code enforcement program as a whole related to any county ordinance. Page 12, section 60, letter A, talks about the valid time for a license is 12 months. That has not changed. The difference is that the language that's currently in Ordinance 84 that gives an additional 30-day grace period was included in this draft. We did have an internal conversation with staff and felt it was important to continue that 30-day grace period after the anniversary month of a renewal for payment. Letter B has been amended to talk about the alteration of an existing license, the fee established by board order, and an alteration that would be subject to that $100 fee is due to the need to reprint, remail, and redistribute an existing license because of an alteration. So not all alterations require the license to be reprinted and redistributed. Some of those do. And so this charge would apply to those that require staff to complete the entire process to reissue an existing license because there's been a change in information. Page 13, subsection was replaced with section at the top, and then D, again, the requirements of subsection ADE. Page 14, letter G. So this is, again, just the clarification
Just
of
lost Sarah's mic.
when, oh, you sure did.
Try
That's
again.
okay. Commissioner Scar, may I borrow your mic, please, because yours is on this. And actually,
Super battery sensitive.
thank you.
It was actually just fine for me.
So, thank you. Excuse me, on page 14, letter G, as I mentioned, section 90, the compliance timeline for section 90 is within 90 days of the renewal. Page 16, letter K, language has been refined to clarify that the copy of the signed fire and life safety checklist be submitted to the department at the time of application for a new license and at the time of renewal of an existing license, meaning that that checklist should be submitted when they are making the request, not as part of later on going out to do the inspection. We'd like to make sure with a new application that those detectors, those important fire and life safety components have already been verified, that they are in working order before we get there. And then because we only do inspection every 3 years, at the time of the annual renewal, we would like that checklist to confirm that the owner or operator of the rental is making sure that those fire and life safety features are to remain in good working order. Moving on to page 19, at the bottom, section 90A. So this language, again, exists in Ordinance 84 as it's been adopted, and essentially what it does is within the timeframe of a new license submittal, application submittal, requires the owner-operator to call in for that fire and life safety inspection. So we want a timeline on there. We want to make sure they're calling in within a reasonable period of time so that we can process their application and get the inspection done. With that, again, standard requiring that a person at least 18 years of age or older is there at the rental that day for entry. Letter B, denied, is a word that was added instead of invalidated when it comes to if the inspection and work that received requirement for reinspection is not done within the specified timeline, the application is denied. Moving forward to page 22. So section 110. So this language has been amended from the June 13th hearing to reflect when existing rentals are required to come into compliance with section 70 and section 80 and section 90. Page 24, the fee for appeal, so that's section 140, letter D, talks about establishment of a fee as established by board order. And that recommended fee is $500. Those are not public hearings, so we do not have to go through the public notification requirement with the paper and others if the commissioners remain as the appeal body. So because we are changing our appeal process and working with the hearings officer, we are able to actually reduce the appeal fee from what it currently is. And then letter G on page 25, the record of appeal, it states complaints about the short-term rental or property. And the reason why that is important is because the current ordinance language and the amended ordinance all require that a property with an STR license remain in compliance with any county ordinance and local, state, and federal law. If there is a violation or some sort of enforcement issue, that needs to be resolved immediately in order to maintain good standing of the STR license. And so that is what that's referring to when we add the word property, is to make sure that consistency is there. And then before I turn the microphone over to Mr. Kearns, on page 26, the third reading with today's date is noted. So thank you very much.
Any questions about that? That was a lot. The part I'd like to talk about a bit is transferability, and kind of a step back. This, as we go through this and we put more detail into transferability and a number of these other provisions, you see it's getting a lot more complicated, and I think that's just what happens when you get more regulatory oversight, and I've seen it in jurisdiction after jurisdiction throughout the state, and it's just a natural consequence of having a more detailed regulatory program. So I tried to keep the transferability provisions as simple as possible, but to cleave as closely as possible to what you explained you would like to see by way of what licenses are transferable, and how. So as I saw it, it first implicated several definitions. What I would like to see, kind of as a lawyer who might be trying to apply these or enforce these or defend these, is try to keep the defined terms, especially those that have kind of a common usage, a common legal usage, keep them as close to possible with those common definitions, and not introduce a lot of weird exceptions that affect your policy. So I tried to make the definitions more generic, and then the provisions that you wanted by way of what's transferable or not, put that in the substantive part of the ordinance. So I have a few tweaks to the definitions, but then what I'm trying to implement your policy is down in section 040, where it talks about what's transferable and what's not, and under what circumstances. So to clean up the definitions a bit, the change in property ownership, that's not really an expression that's used anywhere in the ordinance, so I thought, let's get it out. Kind of complicates what's ownership and what's not, what's changed and not, just get it out of there. And revise the definition of owner and ownership. As you all know, as my observation too, that traditionally these are just owned by, these homes are generally owned by individuals, and they're the kind of casual family renting that occurred over many, many generations, has now changed somewhat with the age of the internet, and there are these online booking agencies. So you see more sophistication in the ownership models of these dwellings. And also as families, the parents get older, the kids grow up, they want to be able to transfer title to the kids, but which kid will transfer them either to a trust, or oftentimes that's a model. So it gets, even though it's still a family home, it gets transferred into a trust or a family LLC. Owner I've revised to mean, kind of hopefully to reflect those different modes of ownership. Means one or more natural persons, a partnership, corporation, or trust that owns and holds legal, equitable, or beneficial title to the property as shown on the recorded title to the property. Any person or entity holding any ownership, equitable, or beneficial interest in such real property shall be considered an owner for purposes of this ordinance. And here's kind of the corporate part. Officers and shareholders of corporations that hold title to real property where an STR is located shall each be considered owners of that property. A change in corporate officers or shareholders constitutes a change in ownership when the corporation holds title to the STR property. So if you want to impose limitations on transferability, I anticipate that you'll, if they're held as a corporation, the ownership of the property sometimes won't change, but the corporation may change hands. So this is intended to get at that. And then the definition of transfer, I propose, means any change in ownership of the real property on which a dwelling licensed as a short-term rental is located. A transfer occurs when there is any change in the owners shown on title to the property reflected in the Tillamook County real property deed records, or a change in the ownership of a corporation that holds title to the property. So again, if they just change the corporation ownership, it catches that. Then down in the part that I hope affects the policy you want, as I heard what you said, when this ordinance comes into effect, going forward, new licenses won't be transferable.
Correct.
Existing licenses on the day this ordinance comes into effect, just as a general proposition, get one transfer. And then it refers back to that definition of transfer and the change in ownership. So, but in terms of kind of giving a, not limiting family-owned properties, so if they convey, transfer the ownership within the family, as I heard what you said, you wanted that to not be so limited, to not have any no limitation on the number of transfers, as long as it's within the family. So in the land use business, it's always tricky to define family, since there's a lot of federal case law that kind of ties your hands on what a family is. So in this, I proposed any STR license existing at the time of adoption of this 2023 ordinance is eligible for one transfer to another licensee, after which any new owner of the property is obligated to apply for a new license in its own name under the requirements that apply at that time. The purpose of this, for purposes of this subsection, a licensee is one or more natural persons, a partnership, corporation, or trust holding title to or owning a short-term rental property. Thus, pre-existing STR licenses on the date of adoption of this 2023 ordinance may be transferred once from one such licensee to another with a transfer of ownership of the property, after which all new owners must apply for a new license in their own name under the then applicable requirements. This limitation on STR license transfers with the transfer of ownership of the property does not apply to ownership transfers within families, among family members, that's people related by blood, marriage, or adoption, or to a family trust. Such STR license transfers as property is transferred between and among family members or a family trust may occur without limitation, and the STR license will transfer with ownership of the property. All STR license holders shall notify the STR administrator of any and all changes in property ownership within 60 days of such changes. All new initial STR licenses issued after the adoption of this 2023 ordinance are not transferable when property ownership changes, in which case ownership transfers shall terminate the license and the new owner must apply for a new STR license in their own name under the then applicable requirements. Is that what you wanted? Is that, okay. I'm sure that was a lot there, but I tried to explain the basic notions that transfers among family members, within families, and family trusts won't be limited in the number of transfers possible. That's the goal.
Right, so there is still possibly a loophole that we talked about that's going against what we want. So one of the things we talked about a lot in the committee is that there are families that have an LLC, which makes them a corporation.
Mhm.
And so a change in the members of that LLC, let's say they want to add a family member. Now it is a change in owners that would kick them out from being able to, it would make it a change. They would have to go reapply, is that correct? Or does the fact that you said family members mean family members in a corporation setting?
It doesn't anticipate corporations. And so the struggle I had was to define a kind of a family LLC versus any other sort of corporate entity. But given the list of kind of family ties that I had there, let's see, where's it? Transfers within families, among family members, that's people related by blood, marriage, or adoption, or to a family trust. So what you're saying is if it's held, title's held by an LLC, that if there is a change of the shareholders or corporate officers that involves a family member, but the problem I had is how do you define a family member for a corporation?
And that was one of the challenges we spent a fair amount of time talking about in the committee. And that was because someone brought up, they said, well, so, it's myself and my husband that are the LLC, and we've done that because it provides us protections, right? And now my child comes of age, and I want to add my child to that LLC because we're aging out. And the way it's currently written, when I add my child, that's a change in ownership. Our license goes away and we have to apply for a new one. Is that correct?
That's how it is because of the difficulty I had in
Okay.
defining a family LLC.
Sure.
But how about if the LLC, all the members of the LLC are family members, then addition or subtraction of officers or shareholders in the LLC that are similarly family members. But it kind of has to be, everyone's in the same family as I
As
just
defined.
described it. And so if you've got your neighbor, that kills it.
Right,
If you've got your CPA, that kills it.
right. I think if we could do that similarly defined family member, I think we would meet what members of the committee were concerned about.
Yeah.
Is just that there is a long history in Tillamook County of family beach homes and wanting to be able to keep that, right? That history, that rich tradition you referred to. So if we can make, even though they've chosen an LLC because it is a structure that protects and supports. So if
Limits
we
liability.
could, yeah, so if we could make that familial connection inside an LLC a space that's safe to add or subtract,
Family members.
family members only,
Okay.
I think we would
could do
achieve
that.
what the goal was.
But that's how we would define like a family LLC, is all the
Yeah.
members are related.
Right,
I
as
just
you have
described.
As you have described it. Like a trust.
Like a trust, but an LLC.
Yeah, oftentimes trusts are limited to families too, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And LLCs are
usually-
corporations.
Usually when the LLC, you have a passing of an older parent, then the kids basically will, many
So I'm
times,
gonna, we're gonna, yeah, so
This is.
at this point,
is-
this is the legal piece of it, and
Alright.
so I think what we've given you, Dan, is our desire for
Yes.
what the language needs to do legally.
Okay, so maybe when it comes time for testimony,
Yeah.
that kind of granular explanation would, I think, help inform all of us, including me.
Perfect.
I'm not a corporate lawyer, so
Perfect, so corporate lawyers in the room.
raise your hand.
So I believe that Mr. Keane in the
There's
front row
always
is
one,
fine.
right?
So, okay, so we'll
okay.
get to that with public comment. So
May I ask,
question, yeah.
Bill, are you comfortable with kind of what we're saying here?
Yeah, and I was gonna point out too, you know, whenever an enforcement action comes up, Sarah usually consults with me and,
Right.
you know, we're gonna look at the language and try to figure out if this is somebody who's trying to sneak around
Right.
and transfer when they shouldn't
Okay.
be, but if it looks like it's a family, it smells like a family, we're probably gonna say, we're not gonna pursue this, so
Okay.
you know, that's how Sarah and I have worked on a lot of these enforcement things before. We try to sort of follow what the ordinance says, but also,
The intent.
yeah,
Okay.
based upon what you guys all are saying today. So, you know, gives us a little wiggle room.
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, Commissioner Bell, any questions for you?
No, I'm glad to have the conversation. I think the bottom line is that we want people to be able to keep their STRs in their families. We want you to be able to will them to your children and for them to be able to stay in your family for generations.
And there is a mechanism for the county to monitor some of these things through the Secretary of State's website, through the property deed records of the county. And then if there's a question, if it doesn't make sense, you ask them, you ask the applicant, the licensee.
Okay.
Okay. Sarah, you have a comment there?
I do, Madam Chair, and I want to be fair to County Council, Mr. Sargent. He did not take my draft, so it is in this room floating around somewhere. I was, so thank you for sharing yours, I really appreciate it. Letter F in section 80, this was the noise, the daytime noise. The board did direct staff to remove that language from the draft.
What page
from
is
the,
that?
Page on the
Page 4.
markup, it is page 15 with the yellow highlights. You did receive two versions of the ordinance draft. The draft dated June 29th with no markup does have that noise provision removed, but I did not remove it from the markup draft with the yellow. So just for the record, staff acknowledges that letter F, which are the noise provisions during the daytime, those actually have been removed. And thank you, Mr. Sargent.
Okay. We just have quiet hours. Okay, thank you for
Thank
that.
you.
Okay, so commissioners, are we ready to hear public comments? Okay, so the intention had been to place the microphone at the table. So a couple of things before public comment. It is currently 6 o'clock. We will take public comment for approximately an hour. My request is, if you have already made the public comment that you were going to make today, please stand down and allow people who have not yet commented to make a comment. Or if the comment you have today is new, please feel free to make it. But if it's something that you have already said to us and you just want to say it again for punctuation, we're asking that you leave space for others to comment as well. Okay, the microphone will be on the table. We will do as we did last time. We'll call you in threes. Are you gonna put them, oh, that one's on the table.
So we will need another chair.
Okay, we'll call you as we did in threes and ask you to come up so that we can do this as efficiently as possible. I don't know for sure who's in the room and who's online, so bear with us as we work through that. Sometimes it's not as it states on my paper. So the first 3 people for public, and 2 minutes each, please, and Sarah will be timing.
Yes.
And we will stop you at 2 minutes, because we do want to get through this and hear from folks. So I have Annie Bishop, Brenda Hofstetler, and Dusty Muth. And Brenda indicates on my list she is virtual. All right, thank you. Annie, please go ahead and we'll see how close you need to be to the microphone here.
Can you hear me? No?
You have to
Can
speak
you
up.
hear me?
Speak up.
I have a soft voice.
There you go, that's better, thank you.
I'm very nervous.
Don't be nervous.
Don't be nervous.
Hello, Commissioner Scar, Bill, Yonemoto, Sarah, and the hardworking STR board members. I am Annie Bishop and have attended all the STR board meetings this year. I've been working in the STR business for over 20 years, starting as a housekeeper to working in the management office to now trying to build my own STR business. With that comes a huge amount of understanding of this industry. So with that, at all the meetings that I have heard, I have come up with a solution. To help fund building of the houses, we are going to tax the commissioners a building fee out of their paychecks to give grants to people to build their homes. Then we are going to set a strict amount of rules for the commissioners to follow. If not complied with and 3 staff members complain, then they will be suspended from their job. If they would like to contest these allegations, the person responsible for suspending them is also their review committee. No family members can ever run for a commissioner's job or be a county employee. I know this is really shocking and very awful to say, but this is exactly how this new ordinance makes the STR homeowners feel. You're trying to solve a problem that is way too much control and takes so much away and gives homeowners no backup or help to enforce it. With the ordinance, the homeowners are responsible for every action that has happened and can lose everything over others' actions. I don't think homeowners mind following the rules that you have already set and have gone beyond that because they do care about their homes and the neighborhoods that they are in. STRs are a business, but not a business. It is our land, but not our land. Good neighbor policies are wanted, but only for the people that need to follow these policies or the guests that come to visit, not the neighborhood. If we are a business, then we should be able to sell our business as many times as we like. A true good neighborhood policy would be a neighborhood that all follow this policy. I understand that certain areas have different needs. I believe that the ordinance should stay as it is and get designed by these areas for their needs, not general ones that do not meet all the needs. Please don't pass this ordinance, for once it becomes the Band-Aid, it will never change. We have seen that many times. Give Sarah the time to go to these different communities, find out what will be made best for these communities, what is
Annie,
it
thank
is
you so much.
designed for,
Your 2
and
minutes
its
is up,
history.
Annie,
Sorry.
thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just
Bill.
waiting for you to take a
I'm
breath,
so
I'm so
sorry.
sorry. but
I
thank
tried
you.
to read it as best I could.
Sure, thank you. Okay, Brenda Hofstetler. Is Brenda online with us?
I believe so.
Hi, I'm here.
Okay, Brenda, please go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Okay. So good evening. I'm Brenda Hofstetler. In public comments, my partner and I discussed cashing out our retirement to buy a beach house to meet our special needs of one of our children. To afford this, we also needed to rent out the house. Short-term rentals met the bill because we could still use the property for our own personal needs. This led us to search for current short-term rental approved spaces. Happy Camp, a place tourists have been visiting since nearly the early 1900s. And knowing the last policy review was done in 2019, we figured we were safe from a headache when we purchased in 2021. Wrong, we were. Looking at this document, it is a choose your way adventure book, except it's not a fantastical early teen novel, but rather a 1,000 ways to fail as an STR. 21 days in one spot, 30 days in another, 60 days in another, with no inclusion of slow mail. If this, then that, and no way to really appeal. Nor were any of these regulations done with actual data, or if it was really a problem or not. There's no inclusion of murky beds, which at least 4 houses in Happy Camp have, as part of their original build in 2007. How is it under 12 and under are kids when the age of majority doesn't begin until 18? Where in Section 130 is there a reality or a way to redress harassment and abuse calls done by a neighbor? Why overthink and make this all so complicated? because parking on the street should be with residents with stickers. Why address or who addresses the permanent neighbors that are regarding noise? I personally would not risk being shot by showing up at anyone's place asking them to turn something down. That is the role of law enforcement. I respectfully ask that the county simplify this document, create with objective rather than subjective data, and grandfather people in. In all my years of policy development, and I have done a lot, I have never created a policy without any actual data points to guide me.
Thank you,
This is
Brenda.
concerning.
That's your 2
I ask-
minutes. Thank you. Okay, Dusty Mook. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. Mook?
Mute.
Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to speak. My husband and I bought our place in 2016. We have been coming up here for many years. We chose to place our home on short-term rental so that we have eyes on our property and know when something is happening. We stay connected with our neighborhood. We try to use our place at least once every 2 to 3 months. We know our neighbors. We keep our place up, the lawn mowed, the weeds down. We don't want crime in our neighborhood either. We like other families staying at our home so that they can enjoy a little bit of peace in such a busy world. My husband and I love coming up here to go fishing, walking on the beach, and hiking. We plan on retiring here, so we are trying to set things up to make that happen. The way I see it, we pay property taxes, rental tax, along with other fees, which benefit the community. 2 of my disagreements is requiring a closet and a 7-foot ceiling. Our home is a small A-frame. We use the loft as a bedroom. There is no way to meet the closet or the 7-foot ceiling requirement that is being implemented through these new building codes. I feel like these new codes that the county is trying to impose on short-term rentals is not feasible. We ask that all current STRs be grandfathered in and implement the new codes on any new construction going forward. And furthermore, I do not see a connection to having a closet and a 7-foot ceiling to a good or bad neighborhood trait. I've met some of the nicest people who rent the short-term rentals. They are not running it down, tossing out the trash out the front door. We are here to protect our investment in this community. Thank you for taking time to listen to what I have to say.
Thank you.
Okay, the next 3. Tom Fuller, Judy Hobdy, and Lori Kovac. Tom, I'm saying, maybe I'm not saying right, Foeller, Tom Fuller?
I believe they are online, Madam Chair.
Okay, perfect, because
I
they
did
weren't.
try to do a sound check with them earlier.
Okay,
but
perfect.
I did not hear them.
Tom Fuller, Judy Hobday, and Lori Kovac.
Fine.
Hi, Lori.
Did you hear me?
We can hear you. Why don't you go ahead and kick us off, Lori? 2 minutes, please.
Okay, great. My name is Lori Kovac and I am from Neskowin. I support the proposed ordinance revisions. In addition, I encourage you to also include a method to control the concentration of short-term rentals in our community. While considering your final decisions about the revised short-term rental ordinance, I ask you to focus on the residents of the county who will be affected by your decisions for years to come. In many cases, literally determining if they can expect neighbors or tourists in the homes on their street. In order to understand how the citizens of your communities feel about their neighborhoods, I ask you to refer to the community plans that residents have spent hundreds if not thousands of hours discussing and revising. On page 23 of the Neskowin Community Plan, it reads, the Neskowin Community Plan recommends that Tillamook County's comprehensive plan designate Neskowin as a rural community and provide for its land uses accordingly. The designation supports these Neskowin value statements. A place where a quiet, natural beach environment is found in individually owned properties as well as along the streets and public property. A place where the environment and beauty and natural setting is prized. A village predominantly made up of private residences with a minimum of commercial activity and a respect for the appropriate construction guidelines. As you know, the short-term rental community comprises approximately 20% of the residential properties in Neskowin. Despite their loud voice, the fact that organizations like the Oregon Coast Host and their membership repeatedly refer to Neskowin as a resort community. It is contradictory to the conclusions of the county-sponsored Nescoin Community Plan. I encourage the commissioners to focus on county community plans when making final decisions on the values represented in the revised short-term rental ordinance. And I really appreciate your letting us have public comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think Tom Fuller, it looks like I see you there.
Yes,
You're-
hello.
2 minutes, please.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. I'll just get right to the point, and then I'm going to give you a little background. I think we're mostly concerned about two things, transferability, and from what I heard from the attorney, it sounds like we're on the same track in what our family needs. It looks like the intent is to keep things within the family. That's what we want to do for sure. One question I have is, again, I own this a duplex, 2 short-term rental licenses or permits right now with my brother and sister. We have not formed a protective cover LLC, a trust at this point. We'd like the ability in the future, as we pass this on to our kids, maybe before then, to transfer into one of those entities. We're probably tenants in common or tenants in the entirety with a right of survivorship. Anyway, that's the most important thing for us, and it sounds like, again, it's the intent of the commissioners, and we wholly agree with that, to keep things within the family. The other quick thing is operational requirements. My sister and brother live here in the Portland area. It takes us a couple hours to get down there. We do have folks that keep watch on our property. Like to get a little bit of leeway. Highway 6 isn't always the easiest thing to get through in case there is something that can't be handled over the phone. So a little bit of leeway there would certainly help. And also, I think the complaint, I understand the complaint process. I think it's good. I'd like to see another ordinance go into effect, perhaps separate from this, where all homeowners in Tillamook County would have the same restrictions or same process. And just real quick, my family's been going down to Rockaway Beach primarily for over 70 years. I've been doing it for
Okay, Tom, that's your 2
over that
minutes.
myself.
Yeah, Tom, thank you
Oh,
so
is that
much.
quick?
That was,
Okay,
yeah,
we're a
that's your 2
family,
minutes.
we're a family, we want to keep going.
Thank
Okay,
you so
thank
much. Okay, Judy Hobday. Did we find Judy online? I'm gonna go ahead and move on and ask Ryan Tabb, Timothy Brennan, Paul Grover. Are any of you in the room with us tonight? No. Okay, how about online? Ryan Tabb? Timothy Brennan? Paul Gover? Okay, not finding them, I'm gonna move on. Norm Scott, Pete Stone, Dan Hendricks. There's some winners, here we go. Feel like we're raffling things off or something, and nobody stayed to the end. Okay, Norm, if you would mind.
Hi there. About 3 years ago, I came to Nescoin and, kind of fell in love with the community. And I decided, hey, I'm gonna build a house, buy a lot, and so I went to work on that. And within 3 months, I had bought a lot, went through the planning. So I've been working on this house for 2 years now. And, we got the permit a year before the moratorium. The rules, it concerns me that, when you make a huge investment in a house, that the rules change on you, and that's been difficult for me to deal with. We started off as a 6-bedroom house, and I had aspirations of making it a short-term rental. Halfway through, we decided that we would switch it to a duplex, And basically, it was still gonna be a 6-bedroom house with flexibility, so it would be a big, 6-bedroom, that would be most of the rental, and then, at times in off seasons, we'd do a 2 and a 4. And I've been concerned that, hearing that, people that own a duplex may only be able to sign up for one of their duplexes, which would be terrible for me. The whole idea is being creative and being able to block certain areas off, and, the idea that it would normally be just a 6-bedroom with a small letter duplex. So anyway.
Okay, that's your 2 minutes. Thank you.
Okay.
I know it goes fast, doesn't it?
Yeah, all right.
Thank you. My name is Pete Stone. I own a short-term rental in Nadana Beach, and these views are my own and don't represent any other group. In all the discussion here regarding short-term rentals, I'm struck by the fact that many of the complaints I'm hearing have more to do with higher tourist levels than specifically short-term rental issues. I think what often happens in the tourist zones of our county is that full and long-term residents get used to what happens in the off-season periods. When half the houses around them are empty, there's little traffic, and few people around. It becomes the baseline for everything to get compared to. This is understandable, but these residents should also realize that when you live in a popular tourist area, things are going to significantly change when the weather gets better. And suddenly the vacation homes around you fill up again. Homes that were purchased by others to enjoy and sometimes share with visitors. Suddenly there's more traffic, people walking around, and the sounds of families having a good time. This is the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness we've all agreed to share and should agree to share going forward. People like to visit and stay here for the very same reasons residents like to live here. So what should be a reasonable goal here? I think if the foremost specific concerns that are commonly mentioned, parking, noise, garbage, occupancy levels, and if you can come up with reasonable limits on these, haven't you addressed 95% of the problem? And if regulating these issues is in the interest of neighborliness is a good idea, shouldn't these same rules apply to all? Visitors who stay in short-term rentals essentially are doing the exact same things all residents here do. Eating, sleeping, having a barbecue, reading or watching TV, and going out into the community and spending money, and supporting local jobs and businesses. I would hope that going forward, you don't create an ordinance that limits one of the most important economic engines here that helps Tillamook County thrive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Dan.
Thank you. I'm Dan Hendricks, and I have an STR in Oceanside. This is regarding section .080 subsection M as in Mary, solid waste collection. Requiring STR owners to pay for weekly garbage service should not be a requirement. In Oceanside, City Sanitation provides an on-call service for garbage pickup at $14.70 per can. Their requirement is to call for this service by noon on the Monday prior to the pickup on the following Tuesday. We've been using this service ever since we purchased our home in 2019. As an STR owner, our home is not always occupied by us or a renter every single week. There are many weeks our garbage cans are empty. Requiring us to have and pay for this service, whether we have garbage or not, is discriminatory. Are all Oceanside homeowners required to have this service, even the homeowners who are not STR owners? I'm aware of some Oceanside homeowners who are not always at their homes, but when they are, they take their garbage with them when they leave. We've done the same. Focusing on STR owners only is to discriminate against STR owners and to cause them to suffer a negative financial impact. If you require STR owners in Oceanside to have this service, then every week you may be requiring us to pay $14.70 to collect an empty can. $14.70 week after week after week for an empty can. That's a minimum of $765 a year. Does this really make sense to you? Your requirement should be that if home is occupied by either the homeowner or an STR renter, then the STR owner should make arrangements, such as contacting City Sanitary for Oceanside, to have accumulated garbage properly removed. This current requirement is absurd. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on, Margaret Page, Terry Tarcia, and Marilyn Kearney.
Norm.
Margaret, come on up. Terry Tarcia,
Waiting for the traffic jam to clear.
Marilyn Kearney. Do you want to grab the microphone?
Oh, heck yes.
Oh, thank you. I know it helps, especially when you're facing the opposite direction.
I guess I'll jump right in. Good evening, Commissioners Bell, Scar, and Yamamoto. Margaret Page here. First, I noticed in the package distributed to all of you at the May 30th public hearing, the letter from the Tillamook County Board of Realtors, one entire page of Pam Zielinski's letter regarding the work of the Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee, and a memorandum prepared by land use attorneys associated with the National Association of Realtors were missing. These were submitted as instructed. I'd like to know at some point if you received and read these documents, particularly the legal analysis. As I've tracked the progress of this amended ordinance since the beginning of the year, a few things have jumped out at me. Why are you saying it's not a zoning ordinance or change? To get around due process, I think. Why does the proposed ordinance reference livability of neighborhoods but does not define livability? I looked up several definitions. None of them are addressed in this ordinance. It requires a bedroom to have a closet armoire to sleep in. Why? When I travel, I live out of my suitcase. One travel service parking spot must be provided for each bedroom within 100 feet of the property. Why? That's not required of other types of residences. Better to limit the number of vehicles which can accompany visitors in short-term rentals. The number of guests will be limited to 2 per bedroom plus 2 more plus 3 children. How are you going to enforce this? Closed-circuit TV? When and if adopted, new short-term rental increases may not be transferred to new owners. Why not? That would mean someone selling the house would have to anticipate a closing date and not take any reservations after that date, or cancel all reservations that have been made past the date of closing. If I reserved a home a couple of months in advance, I'd be pretty upset. I have a lot more thoughts, but I only got 2 minutes. Thank you for your time.
Right on time, thank you. Okay, I did not, Terry and Marilyn, you didn't find them online either? Moving on, Jim Bartles, Jerry Keene, and Terry Hull.
Madam Chair, we do have a Terry Margos online.
I had a Terry Tarcia. I have a Jim Bartles.
Madam Chair, I don't know if any of these members of the public are some of the phone numbers, so maybe the instructions for how to mute and unmute.
I will circle back to everyone we missed at the end and explain the *6 again. Okay, so Jerry Keene.
Commissioners, thank you. At the June 13th hearing, this board rejected a proposed rule that would support neighbors who complain when short-term rental visitors bring their sound systems out and share their music with the entire neighborhood. I was in a fraternity. This happens, and it often starts before 10 p.m. I'm offering this response to that act for the record as a member of the advisory committee. Noisy parties were a top livability issue in every STR survey our committee received. It was second only to parking. We spent hours debating parking. It took us 15 minutes to endorse this rule against noise. It took you 3 minutes of deliberations to reject it. Given the high profile of the issue, it deserved more. Furthermore, Director Absher drafted this rule and presented it to the committee at our final meeting. She then wrote a memo opposing the rule because the wording she drafted was too subjective and vague to enforce. The committee never had an opportunity to address her concerns or to try other workable language. Finally, at the May 30th hearing, I proposed revisions to address these concerns by supporting complaints when music is loud enough to disturb neighbors inside their own homes. Commissioner Bell expressed interest in that approach, and I look forward to further discussions of it at the next hearing. That didn't happen, and the record contains no explanation. You don't owe me an explanation, but the record would be stronger if it reflected one. I'll close with 3 observations. First, every loud STR party pits visitors against the neighborhood. As things stand, this ordinance will place the law squarely on the side of the visitors who are disturbing the community. Second, the great majority of visitors will respond to a call from STR managers relaying complaints from neighbors. Without any rule, there will be no legal basis for managers to make those calls. At the very least, we should have given this rule a chance to work before we declared it unworkable. Third, I'm sure you recall how noisy static on the sound system here disrupted your deliberations last hearing. The noise was so distracting that you were ready to throw the viewer out of the meeting, and you were visibly frustrated that there was nothing you could do about that noise. Please consider that eliminating the daytime noise provision leaves your constituents in exactly the same position. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Okay. If you are online and you are on the telephone, you will need to press *6 to unmute yourself and be heard. I'm going to circle back in case any of those phone numbers are any of these individuals. Judy Hobday. If you're on the telephone, you need to press *6 to unmute yourself. Ryan Tabb. Timothy Brennan. Paul Gover.
There's somebody unmuting.
So a phone number ending in 2315, you are unmuted. Are you one of the names I have called?
Yes.
Okay, can you please identify yourself?
Yes, my name is Ira Levin.
Okay, so not
I live
on.
in Esquin.
Okay, not on the list. Okay, can you? I'm calling off of my list. So I'm sorry. Thank you, Ira. If you could go back on mute. Terry Tarcia. Marilyn Kearney. Okay, we're going to keep going. Terry Hull, Paul Lowry, Christine Reeder.
Madam Chair, the readers are online. She's right there.
Christy Reeder, would you like to unmute and make a comment? Okay. Roy Zerbrug, sorry. Hillary Gibson and Tom Dotson. Go ahead, thank you, right to minutes.
Camp Roy Zerbrug. We have a rental at Nodona Beach. I'm here basically concerning the use it or lose it part of the ordinance we're going to have. Okay, we're remodeling that unit. I'm expecting it to take probably 4 months or so. Now, I need some type of a time limit. Now, as far as I know, there's nothing in the ordinance that says how long I have it to do it. And if I'm under construction, obviously it's not being used, so I can lose it. So I need to something specific on the ordinance so that we can plan ahead to know, okay, how long do I have before I lose it? And also, during the month, we rent it quite a bit. During the winter, it may be a month or so, nobody there. And am I gonna lose it because nobody's there for a month? So we need some type of definite information in the ordinance so we can plan ahead, so we know exactly what's gonna happen if something is not being used, and also time limits. So that's basically what I'm after is a specific, use it or lose it detail. We need something specific.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. My name's Hillary Gibson. This comment is on my own personal behalf, although I've been here before representing Oregon Coast to Coast. Today, I just kind of basically want to say that I have concerns that the county's taking a sledgehammer to STRs when we really just need to tweak some of the current regulations just slightly. If you change too many things at one time, you're not going to be able to see what's effective and what's not effective. So changing 20 things instead of a couple things, you won't be able to dial in what's working and what's not working. So I advocate for keeping the regulations simple, straightforward, and also equitable. Along the lines of what Jerry was saying about the noise, If the county has a county-wide noise ordinance, that would solve a lot of problems, because I agree, it's hard to hold certain people, like short-term rentals, to such a higher standard as far as who can have a party and who can't have a party. Otherwise, specifically, things that I have concerns about are the 24/7 coverage. Before it was confirmed by the county that we could have more than one person, like a backup, be listed for 24/7 coverage, and I tried to do that, and I was told several times that that's not possible. Granicus only gives us one slot, and it cannot be accommodated. So I'm stuck with paying $100 to change a contact person while I hop on a flight to go across the country, and then $100 to change it back, because they can't let us have a backup person. Next, the 30-minute in-person response time is new. While the actual response time isn't new, having to have somebody physically be there, that part is new to this ordinance. And that is not backed up by data. I don't know how many violations were issued that were a result of somebody not having to have a person there. Next off, we have an exterior signage requirement to have an expiration date. That doesn't make any sense. You need a new sign every year. Next off, you have to have the Granicus complaint line on the interior signage. Also no complaint. I don't know why a short-term rental guest would need to call Granicus. I agree with the person from Oceanside about the weekly trash costs. I've had it on call. That's all you need to do. And leave our permits. We don't want them changed to licenses.
Thank you very much, Hillary. 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Tom?
Hello. Hello, Commissioners. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. My name is Tom Dotson, and I am one of the general managers that oversees a large portfolio for BOCC on the Oregon coast. As you face this daunting task of finalizing the STR ordinance, I ask you to take a step back and remember why we are all here. We are all seeking a common sense approach that can provide a balanced results for those who find STRs to be problematic, and for those who are looking for a peaceful outcome as a means to preserve their investment in our communities. I have managed BOCC vacation homes for over 10 years and have witnessed multitude of changes, but none as much as when COVID drove people in waves to our communities, which in result caused residents to reach out to Sarah and share their concerns and complaints that brought us here today. But we must remember that we are no longer in that environment. Bookings have normalized and even dropped in some areas, and I do not believe that we will ever experience that COVID situation again. With this in mind, knowing that while we have a busy summer ahead, bringing much needed tourism to our area, things have settled down and are not aligned with many of the regulations in this draft. They are vague and in many cases overreaching, requiring second homeowners to adhere to policies that their neighbors next door does not. There are too many examples of this, but it just doesn't seem fair, does it? Additionally, many of the regulations are blanket or one-size-fits-all, which we all know will not work throughout the various communities along the coast, as they are all unique and offer guests different experiences. I ask that you allow the responsible property managers and the hosts to take care of these issues we are fully equipped to take care of ourselves, like parking, noise, trash, bedroom size, etc., and focus this ordinance on the necessary safety aspects and common sense changes. We look forward to working with Sarah and her fantastic team.
Thank you. This is one I'm not going to get right. Looks like perhaps somebody Patterson. The first name and the last name both start with P, but it's an unclear. I know you're here because you signed in, and I really apologize, but I can't read it. So if you have a first name and a last name, is that P?
Yeah.
I can't read the. I can't read through.
I don't write very well.
That's probably you then. Come on up. Sorry, I was like, I can see the two P's. So then I have Nat Parker and Nathan Rodriguez. Northen. I was right the first time. Sorry about that. And if you'd pass the microphone down, so.
Yeah, my apologies to everybody for phone indiscretions. Is this ready now?
It should be ready for you. 2 minutes, good sir.
I'd like to address inequities and false witness, just for your consideration. These things have actually happened in my life. I owned a guide shop for a long period of time, still do, but there's no shop there. And we used to use a house that I'm living in now as a vacation rental to support guides and the fishermen and such. There was also a cottage there. The cottage ended up being rented out to a couple, and they made it their personal, whatever you want to call it, to make everybody that were staying in the vacation rental, which were customers, as miserable as possible. So by making a lot of noise and profanity and things like that, and currently where I'm at, I have a lot of things going on across the river that also includes a lot of noise. And there doesn't seem to be any rules for those people, yet my wonderful customers, which are basically people like you all, they're being prosecuted or pre-prosecuted. I feel like to a certain extent I've already been prosecuted, yet these people can do anything, park anywhere, make any amount of noise, run chainsaws in the middle of the night, burn their garbage, and who's going to prosecute them? Where does it say in here that you have to live up to a certain ideal regardless? Instead, it's if you come to my place, there are rules that the neighbors don't have to live by. Do you deserve that? Do you? Do you? I don't think so. I'd like you to give that some consideration when you do the draw lines things. Somebody's going to move in there. Right now, I'm all vacationals. I know I'm over time, but
If it hasn't gone, you've got, almost there. Now you're there. Just take your time. Thank you. Thank you for your thoughts.
and I'm sorry about that. I got a little wound up when I couldn't hear my name.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't read your name.
My name is Third, and thank you
Okay.
for your patience.
Hi, I'm Nat Parker.
Yeah, you're right.
Is it me?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nat Parker. I'm a homeowner in Tierra Del Mar. My wife and I bought the house 2 years ago on a road trip. Fell in love with the community, and I wanted to just share that we're a family and we use the house for ourselves, but we use it also for short-term rental income. That's been indispensable during COVID. We know our neighbors really well. We have a Pacific doryman who's right next to us. We have an old couple who takes care of seagulls in their yard on the other side. We want to be a part of the community. The people who come and visit us are working people primarily who can't afford their own rental home. I think you should look at the fact that we are working people ourselves as family. Our housekeeper, our landscaper, the plumber Christensen, who I've called when my hose spigot goes out, they're all working people. So I think that STRs are actually the backbone of working people. It's not just rich corporations, as I've heard before. So that's one thing. On housing supply for people who live here and who work here, I think it's apples to orangutans to kind of compare the notion that they would live in the home that I purchased, rebuilt, remodeled, and used as an STR. What I think we need is more multi-family housing in cities like Pacific City, Lincoln City, and others. More affordable options for people who are working, as a bartender or who are working at Chester's, let's say. So I appreciate where you're going, but I think the way that you're going about it is really a takings. And I think that also opens up the county to a lot of legal risk and financial risk related to Measure 49 claims. So it's just something that I understand the intent. We want to be a great neighbor. We're committed to doing that, but how you do it really matters. And I think that removing and revoking permits, for the so-called license, that's a taking of my rights under land use law. So I hope that you don't do it. But I'm here to be a partner and support the county and its goals. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I couldn't agree more with my friend to my right. And Mr. Kearns and commissioners, I hope you read the letter from Tokentorp dated on June 29th, because I'm not going to go over that letter, but do take your time, because that's input that you need as you make the decisions. So I do have a STR, and I see myself going there and filling up potholes where the county doesn't come fill up the potholes, but I do because Airbnb grades me on location. And all the neighbors actually see me. I know my neighbor to the right, to the left. And interesting enough, this week I came, as you can see, I'm on vacation. I came there, and my neighbor to my right was parked on my driveway and having a huge party. And very they own their house, and there are no laws that prohibits them from that. I even asked them, hey, I'm gonna have to charge you for parking so I could find a place to put my car. And they stay partying till 2 in the morning. My wife and I know that, so we block our house, and either we are there because we know that our guests will be complaining because we don't allow parties. And by the way, talking about rich corporations, we don't make any money. We pay over $50 an hour for cleaning services. So we overpay people so they can take care of our home because it's my home. And guess what? What we give to the community is much greater. And any money that we make there, we just put back in the house to make the house more livable and enjoyable for the entire area. So as you consider, equity is very important because there is nothing my neighbor can do that will call a commissioner. But if I had a errand guest, by the way, we don't allow parties because I don't want my house destroyed. If I have an errand guest making a problem, I'm in trouble. So let's get equity for all. Giving about room sizes, garbage, and passing on of the sellability of the STRs because it will impact my property value. And as is stated in the letter from attorneys, please take a look at that. Very, very important.
Okay, thank you. Okay, one more person on here, David Carrier. Carter, thank you, sorry.
Well, first, just thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here. I've been listening, trying to follow and follow the ordinance as best I can. Just to give you a little background, we have an A-frame. My wife and I bought an A-frame several years ago. I've read through this ordinance. I'm not certain now whether or not that's going to be a problem for us, but I don't know if it's possible, if we even have 2 bedrooms. We have a loft, and we also have another room, both of which may not meet the requirements. I'm not certain about that. Nevertheless, I was just looking at parking, for example. You guys require, if they do qualify as bedrooms, you require 2 spots. We come to our A-frame and stay there for 2 months of the year. We rent it out the rest of the time as an STR, and we only have 1 spot. And I know that there's some possible accommodations for another, but it doesn't seem fair that I have to seek out approval, or am I going to have to build another parking lot in my front yard? Is that what is suggested here? Pardon me, I'm a little nervous here, so I'm trying to get to the point in 2 minutes. So that concerns me, and the last part, or one other part I wanted to add is that I feel like I'm kind of being attacked here as a homeowner that we couldn't afford to buy this house if we didn't rent it out during 10 months of the year. We were a younger family when we purchased it. I'm uncertain about whether or not we'll be able to keep it if these regulations make it impossible for us to rent them out. I wanted to buy this house and try to pay for it over time so that I could pass it down to my family. And it just feels like, I've been told by many that our houses are not the kind, the smaller houses are not really the problem, but yet I feel like, I'm a problem. When people come to our house, it's usually small families. There's only room for a queen bed and a couple of twin beds and a couch. And, there's 1 car usually, first of all, but it just feels like to me like we're being attacked, and it just doesn't seem very fair.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, that was everyone I had on my list. We had a lot of folks on that didn't unmute online. I think we've been through them twice. We can go one more time. Sarah, do you want to go back up to phone numbers? I'm going to call one more time and see if there's anybody that is online that was struggling to unmute that perhaps would like to make comment. So folks who were signed up that did not. Judy Hobday, if you are online, it is *6 to unmute your telephone. If you're on your computer, you should be able to unmute. Brian Tabb, Timothy Brennan, Paul Gover, Terry Tarcia, Marilyn Kearney, Jim Bartles, Terry Hull, Paul Lowry, Christy Reeder.
Myself off mute.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, could you identify yourself? Or was everything getting muted?
I think that was the Mock family, and I do not believe they testified last time, but I don't believe that they were signed up to testify this time.
We're here. This is Mandy Mock. I did ask to speak, yes.
Okay, Mandy, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, great, thank you. So first of all, good evening and thank you for listening. Short-term rentals make many good things possible. They enable more people to visit and enjoy the Oregon coast. They enable more people to be able to afford second homes at the beach. And they generate significant tax revenue for Tillamook that's used to enhance the capabilities and services we have here. Now, in recent years, a lot of issues have been raised around the short-term rental model, around the behavior of the guests, things like crowded parking, overflowing garbage, and noise. And we thoroughly support enforcing those issues. However, the proposed ordinance goes far further than focusing on guest behavior. It creates very significant barriers to being able to have a short-term rental at all. My husband and I have dreamed of having a home on the coast for a long time. We purchased a very rundown triplex in Oceanside and spent the last 2.5 years remodeling it, both for our family and our guests to be able to enjoy. When we originally saw the triplex, we thought it was a perfect fit. It allows us to enjoy the togetherness of extended family while still allowing for privacy and separation. We want to share this with guests at the coast as well, but limiting rental permits to 1 per owner would prohibit this. We'd like to ask you to reconsider limiting the number of permits. In looking at the actual permits issued in Tillamook County, most by far are already single owners. Out of approximately 1,100 permits, there are only 73 owners who have 2 to up to 5 permits, and most of those are for residences that are duplexes or triplexes. There seems to be a misperception that large corporations are coming in and buying up homes to rent, but as the data shows, this is clearly not the case. I ask you to please reconsider the 1 license limit and allow families who have multi-unit homes at the coast to be able to obtain licenses for all of the parts of their homes. Let's focus on building an ordinance that keeps the good of short-term rentals and solves the real problems with guest behaviors. Let's work together to create the community we want while still enabling the many good things that come from short-term rentals. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I think we made it through public comment in less than an hour.
What the heck?
I guess if you have 3 hearings, it just kind of winds itself down, so that's good news. Okay, if there's, woohoo, all right. Commissioners, I think at that point then, we would be ready to close the public hearing officially to move into deliberation. Is that correct? Do we need to do that, or are we just moving?
Go right on into deliberation.
Right on into deliberation. Okay, perfect, thank you. Okay, Commissioners, we have heard lots of public comment, both in the preceding meetings and this meeting as well. And before us, I am hopeful that we can work our way through any questions and concerns we have in the ordinance this evening to try to make any changes needed to this language. So I will open it up to my fellow commissioners to see if there are points that you would like to start with. Sure, Commissioner Bell, why don't you kick us off?
So I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Thank you all for participating in this process. It sounds like this doesn't work.
You have to get very close. I can hear it.
There we go. Yep, I think it's.
Hello?
Just get very close.
How close?
That close.
Hey, that's dumb. Okay, so thank you all for being here. Thank you for participating in this process. Thank you for your comments. We've really appreciated them. We've learned a lot from them. We knew going into this that there was 0% chance that we were going to make everybody happy. And we won't. We won't be able to make everybody happy. But what we're hoping to accomplish is to carve a path through the middle that will help protect the livability of our communities and enable people who currently have short-term rentals to retain their short-term rentals and slow down the growth. That's what we're hoping for. We're hoping to be able to accomplish what our neighbors to the north and south did not accomplish with rampant growth and the problems that have happened there. So some of you don't agree that there are problems, that's fine. We've heard from so many people about their problems that we know that they exist. A couple of things that I've heard tonight that and read in these comments that I had not heard before that I'd like staff to address for us are the issue of A-frames and 7-foot ceiling with A-frames. We heard from 2 people tonight who have A-frames who may not have 7-foot ceilings other than right in the middle of their building. And the issue of also the closet in an A-frame. And also from Mr. Hendrickson, Oceanside, who talked about weekly garbage pickup being not appropriate for his short-term rental because they don't necessarily have visitors weekly. So I'd like to just ask staff about those items.
Certainly. Thank you, Commissioner Bell. In our microphone, well, I'm going to use it until it dies again, because I think we put new batteries in it, and unfortunately they may not. At least one of them apparently isn't a good battery. So to speak first to the A-frame and the ceiling height, I'd like to direct your attention to section 30. This is the definition section, and letter D.
What page is that?
Let's see. On the yellow highlighted draft, it is page 3. So if you look at the list of details that define a bedroom, I'd like to call your attention to the second bullet. I'm going to read it for the benefit of those in the room who perhaps don't have a copy of the ordinance with them. It states a minimum of 70 square feet of floor space and not less than 7 feet in any, and here's the key word, horizontal direction. It does not talk about ceiling height. What it's talking about is essentially a bedroom would have to be a minimum of 7 feet by 10 feet. So it's a horizontal dimension, it is not vertical. So just hopefully that clears that up and perhaps may set some folks' concerns at ease. With that, when we talk about a closet, the committee spent a significant amount of time poring over and discussing different details of what constitutes a bedroom. The list started much longer than what you see before you this evening. And it has been refined as we've received public comment, had discussions with building staff, etc. The closet element, many of the committee members strongly felt that it is a closet element that helps define a bedroom and separates it from other areas in the house. The trade-off, the compromise to the closet was to encourage families who may sleep in a den or elsewhere that still meet the egress, the window requirements, but do not have a closet, by allowing an additional, essentially 5 people in a rental. That's the 2 persons of any age that come with the, it's 2 people per bedroom plus 2, and then the committee largely, not unanimously, but largely supported also allowing up to 3 children per rental under the age of, under the age of 12. So, while the closet was added to a definition to better define what a bedroom is, the compromise to that was the additional guests that may be able to say, most notably, the 3 children under the age of 12, recognizing a den or other areas within the home may also be able to accommodate some sort of sleeping arrangements.
And the closet can be an armoire.
That is correct.
It doesn't have to be built in.
No, we actually did quite a bit of research. We looked at IKEA, we looked at Amazon, because the committee wanted to make sure that there could be a creative solution. So what could that be? It could be some sort of clothing storage unit. So I would say at the time of inspection, as the STR administrator, some sort of a cardboard box will not work to pass that, right? But we wanted to add that flexibility and that detail of not limiting it to a built-in closet, recognizing, especially in older homes, there may have been an armoire that was used as the feature for the bedroom. So it is supposed to be a closet or some type of clothing storage unit.
Thank you. And a loft could qualify if it's 7 by 10 and there's fire egress.
That is
emergency egress.
Essentially, yes. So there is a list of features to pass those fire and life safety inspections. But those specific elements exist in the ordinance today. The parking requirement of one space per bedroom, or as it reads today, one space per sleeping area, that is not new. So the rentals who are in existence, who qualified because they met those parking requirements and those fire and life safety requirements, if they were accurate at the time of application and license approval, that should not change because ultimately those regulations did not change.
Okay, thank you.
And then with respect to the weekly garbage pickup, there's a lot of testimony that is in the record for these proceedings. There's a lot that we have heard over time. Commissioners have received this in comments about inadequate garbage service, inadequate garbage pickup. The language that is proposed has been refined to the weekly service that also includes the can being moved in and out and not allowing garbage collection outside of the secure container. That is new. But the requirement for proof of garbage service by a franchise hauler, I confirmed with David McCall, who is the county solid waste coordinator, every area in this county falls under a franchise area. The proof of garbage service is something that has always been there, that is required. The weekly service piece, that's our way of addressing the livability issues and concerns about inadequate garbage pickup or collection. There was a conversation about if that is not adequate based on rental use, level of activity, number of persons, perhaps it should be more. So it was the minimum of pickup once a week. And if there's no garbage, there's no pickup. We understand it's an expense, but garbage is a livability issue, and that is reflected in the record.
I'm thinking about that because we know that not everybody rents their short-term rental full-time. And so there may very well be people who don't need weekly garbage service.
That's possible, yes. The committee discussed that as well, Commissioner Bell, and it was trying to figure out where a reasonable requirement could be made to address garbage issues and make sure that collection occurred timely in coordination with rental use, because every rental is different.
Okay, well, I'm still thinking about that.
Thank you.
A couple people talked about noise and asked why we don't have a countywide noise ordinance. We don't have a countywide noise ordinance, that's true, and the reason to date has been because the sheriff's office didn't feel like they could enforce it, basically, because we've talked about it several times and the enforceability issue comes up over and over. I think everybody would like to have a countywide noise ordinance. That doesn't mean that it would be a daytime noise ordinance. I don't know that it would be. But the idea about requiring nighttime quiet for short-term renters makes perfect sense to me because it's also true of all other visitors. So if you go to a hotel, there are nighttime quiet requirements. If you're camping, there are nighttime quiet requirements. It's true of all visitors. So I don't think that it's excessive to require short-term rental visitors to have nighttime quiet requirements. And ultimately, I hope we do have a countywide noise ordinance. I hope we do. Let's see, what else? Okay, I will just pass it to my fellow commissioners until I pull the rest of my thoughts together.
Perfect. Commissioner Yamamoto.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I will address the garbage issue. Almost hate to say this in this room, but my wife and I are actually kind of the reasons that we have the initial short-term rental regulations that we have. When we built our home, there was a home built right across from us at the same time, and it automatically became a vacation rental. It was advertised online as 30-something. In other words, it slept 30 plus people. I have pictures of 17 automobiles parked in our cul-de-sac for one weekend. I have pictures of garbage, which was strewn everywhere. It started in some kind of a trash container out on the deck that was used as a ramp to the garage. And within a week, the crows and the seagulls were in it, and there was garbage strewn everywhere in our cul-de-sac. These are things, and that's one of the reasons that I got involved long before I was a commissioner, to make sure that we had some sort of short-term rental regulations within the county. And I took a lot of heat for that. I see Tim Hirsch in the back of the room. And Tim was at those meetings where I was one of the only voices in the room talking about short-term rental regulations. And that became Ordinance 84. And even when this ordinance is done and completed, it's not going to be completed. This is going to be an ongoing conversation that we have with this community. And it needs to continue. We have kind of two sides here. We have those that bring in money on their short-term rentals, and there are those in our neighborhoods, like in my neighborhood, where we had real problems. These were real problems. I'm looking at Bill Sargent. Bill, you were at the Kaiwan Community Center at several of those meetings where I was testifying. So,
you remember it well, Commissioner.
I'll bet you do. So this has been a tortuous product here. You have seen us make many changes to this ordinance as we talked about this now through our third public hearing. And we keep getting closer to perfection. Is there ever going to be perfection in this? Absolutely not. There will not be. But so I've heard a lot about people testifying that are responsible owners and managers. And yes, honestly, I feel that many, probably most of the short-term rentals out there, being family-run short-term rentals, they do a great job. But it is unfortunate that we have many, many short-term rentals that are not doing that good job in our communities. And they're making enemies of their neighbors, of permanent residents that live in Tillamook County. That's what we're trying to resolve here. And I think we're really very close to that. I want to read just parts of a letter that we received from ORLA, the Oregon Restaurant Lodging Association. This became a part of the public testimony, and this is something that Orla wrote. I very often do not agree with Orla, but their comments in this letter, their testimony about our short-term rental regulation process really is quite amazing. We continue to be impressed with the work being undertaken in Tillamook County. The ordinance is comprehensive and shows a great deal of balance in weighing the needs of local communities while promoting the economic benefits that come with a thriving tourism economy. This is coming from ORLA, the Oregon Restaurant Lodging Association. In the end, they say, all in all, we feel you strike the right compromise with the current ordinance language and the latest amendments. We appreciate the opportunity to comment to you. I think this letter from Orla really does say it all. Again, this is not an easy process. This is not something, I'm sorry, sir, public testimony is over. I feel that this is really an important aspect when Orla can weigh in on the work that this county is going through. And it's been a year and a half. Our short-term rental committee has been working on this for many, many, many months. And that short-term rental committee is not going away. It is going to continue to work. Sarah has already said she is going to continue to work with the communities to fine-tune this ordinance. This is not done. But we need to come to a conclusion here, get something on the books, and move forward. And there will be continuous changes to this ordinance. I just know there will be. So with all of that, I think we're in a good spot. I really do. And as Commissioner Bell states, not everyone is going to be happy with this regulation. Matter of fact, I think when you look at the overall regulation, nobody is going to be completely happy with this regulation. And to me, that tells me if nobody is happy, completely happy with this ordinance, I think we've done our job in kind of trying to find that path down the middle. And honestly, I appreciate very much Sarah and Community Development working through this. I appreciate so much the committee members, the short-term rental committee members that have been working on this for 18 months. And their last 3 meetings, I think, were 6 hours each, something like that, to try to get this done. So this has been a lot of work. I can tell by some of the scowls out there that not everyone is happy. And to me, I think that's probably a good thing. That means we've done our job, we've threaded that needle as best we can, and just be aware, there will be continuing work on this short-term rental regulation. And with that, Commissioner Scar, I'll turn it over to you.
Wow, okay. Well, I gave my speech like that at the very beginning. When we started this, I won't make you hear it again, but I share my fellow commissioners' feelings that this is a tough process and we've done our best to work our way down the middle, and my extreme thanks to everyone who has been a part of it, and that includes the committee and it includes the members of the public who have also been participating, many of them for that full 18 months. Okay, I had a couple other things I heard tonight, Sarah, that I wanted to just ask you about. I'm going to go back to the nuts and bolts, similar to Commissioner Bell. A couple things I wanted to answer, a couple questions also. Margaret Page asked if we had received the legal opinion from the realtors, and yes, we did. So just to clarify for you, we did, and yep, we did, and I know I read it, so I can speak to that. There was another question around use it or lose it in the remodel, and I wanted to let that gentleman know that we had that very conversation in the committee, and it doesn't show up in the ordinance, but what we did talk about was a notification to the director if your rental was going to be offline for a reason, right? Whether it is that you're remodeling, something along those lines, that notification to the director. So I don't know if we need to have that recorded somewhere within our ordinance or other procedure. Got it? Okay, yeah, because that is important. If we talked about what if somebody had a fire, what if they had a pipe break? I mean, all these things can happen, and we wouldn't want somebody to lose and have that use it or lose it clause kick in because they're unable to actually rent it. This is one that came up that does, I guess, strikes a chord with me, the expiration date on the sign and therefore needing a new sign. I don't know if, as we've talked about the sign and something, that was going to be more permanent and visible from the road, whether having to redo that every year is something that makes sense. So that, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd love to speak to that. So one of the things that the department has been working on is an online registry.
Mm-hmm.
It would be very easy to remove that language from the signage requirement, because if the commissioners are agreeable to the department publishing an online registry of all actively licensed STRs that includes their expiration date, parking, maximum occupancy, we've actually built that database to publish online and keep it updated. We could easily remove that language. The point is for, the public and others to know and to ensure that that license remains in good standing within that year. So if we have another place to put it where that's easily inspected by the public, we can remove that from the language.
Okay, thank you. It just does seem like that, just an added cost that didn't seem that burdened. I was curious, the comment about Granicus only allowing one contact person. Is that in our new system? Is that in the system that exists? That also seems somewhat limiting.
Certainly. So Granicus, as we've continued to develop the STR hotline, it was called to our attention, and Commissioner Scar, you were there for the initial meeting with Granicus, as were a handful of vacation rental managers. We were not aware that their system would pull one number as an emergency contact. And we are currently working with them to explore solutions or alternatives to that. So that is something that is underway. We recognize that that may be an issue. I would offer that the signage requirements and the way the ordinance is currently structured, where there is only one number on the sign for the contact person, you know, it may only be one number, and there may be ways, you know, and a management company, an owner or an operator may be able to forward a phone. You know, if there's a way they can notify us and we can put Granicus on notice for that, we're happy to do that if they're going out of the country or something. But largely with most operators and owners using their cell phone, coverage nationwide, I mean, just to be forward. So, Mr. Kearns, did you have anything to add to that?
No, we were a little dismayed to find that Granicus is kind of inflexible that way. I assume they were trying to figure a way. It makes sense. But as I understand it, it's an automated notification that gets called out. So, you know, if they have multiple numbers, I can see the problem. If they have multiple numbers, they call, it goes to voicemail. Does that work? Is that good enough? Do they go to the next number? At some point, I mean, these are operated as businesses and someone needs to be available to respond. Take your cell phone with you. There is nationwide coverage, plus Canada and Mexico. A lot of owners they leave the cell phone at home with some responsible person to handle any calls that might come in. That's not a hard thing to do. And there are management companies, you could forward the number to someone else while you're out of town if you have to go out of the country and you don't have coverage in another country. The thing is, they want someone to respond, and it means like call the rental, call some local response person to deal with something. It's not good enough that the problem gets solved Monday morning after the weekend is over.
Sure.
So that's the point.
No, I totally get the
We're
point.
kinda
I agree
stuck.
with the point.
Kinda
I was
stuck.
just curious that seemed odd for Granicus. So it sounds like you get perhaps one of a pay-as-you-go cell phone that becomes the business phone that you can hand around if you find it a significant issue for you as a owner. So, yeah, not ideal, but very doable.
And we are committed to continuing to find that flexibility, so we will continue to work with Granicus. I mean, that concern did not fall on deaf ears with department staff either.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. The other one we didn't hear tonight, but it was one that occurred to me as we were reading through the ordinance with the use it or lose it, if we determine that we're keeping that in there. It basically begins with your renewal after January of 2024, which is essentially, by the time this is approved and in place, 6 months, 5 months for those who are current owners. And I guess I'm curious if that's long enough, and if that's also if you're going to be working with individual communities to try to figure out where the right levels are for different communities. If there are communities that are ultimately not seeking growth, one of the ways that we talked about that's possible is through the use it or lose it, right? Would it make more sense to have that take effect June of 25, June of 24 rather than January of 24, just to kind of tie it to hopefully what will be the completion of the extra work community by community. So,
thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, that date can be whatever you would like it to be.
Okay.
If the board desires to extend that timeline to when that would go into effect to help with, maybe lowering percentages for those communities that come back and desire a lower percentage for a cap, could even make it January 1st, 2025.
okay, because I think that, as we look at this, the level of short-term rentals that we have right now seems to be meeting the need of people who want to come to our community right now, and with that we have a significant number that are not being used. And so it just seems like we have a couple, we talked about this I think in a previous meeting, just sort of forces at play. One is if you make that use it or lose it happen now, you take all of those short-term rental permits that are not in use and now you basically transfer to somebody who's going to perhaps use them voraciously, which has some community impacts that we heard about in the community of concern, whether we wanted to do that. or whether we wanted to use that in this opportunity to kind of balance numbers across the community. So it's just a thought for us to have in our minds, commissioners. Those were my details. Commissioner Bell, did you have time to gather more thoughts and more things that you wanted to address to staff before we start sort of deliberating as commissioners?
The final caller, Mandy Mock, was talking about their triplex in Oceanside. I think we heard from the Mocks in the last hearing. I think they were here, sitting in the front row. And so if they currently have 3 short-term rental licenses, then I just want to be clear that they will continue to hold those short-term rental licenses, assuming they meet the annual requirements, etc. And then they'll have the opportunity to transfer them once, and thereafter, other people, new owners who are not their children, presuming it's sold and not inherited, other people would have the opportunity to choose which unit to get, for which to get a license, correct?
They have 2 and they want one more.
Correct. So
They have 2 current and they're asking for 1 more to make the triplex.
So in the instance of a triplex and the limited ownership, so the way the language reads that Mr. Kearns and I have drafted, it talks about the ownership limitation going into effect for new licenses issued, so it would not affect those who own multiple licenses today. They just essentially would not be able to get any more. Because it's a duplex and not something like a condominium or something where it's, separate ownership of those 3 units, they would be able to transfer the license. However, because of the limitation in ownership, the way it's written, correct me if I'm wrong, they ultimately would only be able to transfer 1 license. And the other 2 units would have to be used either for long-term rentals or for personal use. Because while the licenses would ultimately transfer one time, if I'm reading this correctly the way it's written, because of the limitation, it would be 1. So that certainly is something to think about. And if that's language you would like us to continue to work on, or we could refine it tonight for you. Because you've got 2 pieces at play there.
So yeah, I think, so we've grandfathered a lot here. And I think we owe it to people that already have short-term rental licenses to continue doing what they do. So Dan, is it going to be possible for us to change that? So if someone currently has 3 short-term rental licenses as a family, I don't know how we, it gets really complicated.
As a multi-family dwelling unit or multi-family structure, right? Because you're not talking about separate homes, you're talking about a common wall attached dwelling units.
Okay, so that makes more sense to me, since it is a triplex or a duplex, something like that. So they would not be able, if they sold the unit. So let me just get this straight. If they passed on that duplex or triplex within the family, nothing changes, correct?
If the ownership limitation license language stays in, that is separate and different than the transferability.
Right, so it's passed on as a family unit.
They equally apply separately. So I don't know how you could transfer and retain 3 STR licenses, because each dwelling unit requires a separate license.
A duplex or triplex?
That's right.
Yes.
So you have 3 licenses, or 2, depending on the number of units. But if the desire of the board is to limit ownership
to just 1,
that means they have to decide which one of those units they want to keep that license in. The exemption is only for transferability. So if you would like an exemption for the license for a multifamily dwelling, with the transferability, then we do need to rework that language.
I wouldn't think that that should be too difficult. That should be a minor change in
So
what
define,
we're looking at.
explain the exception again.
So, a single dwelling unit, that's a duplex or a triplex. So they are currently licensed as either 2 short-term rental licenses for a duplex or 3 short-term rental licenses for a triplex. If they, well, a couple of things here.
If they hold 2 or more STR licenses
Yes.
in a multifamily attached
Yes.
structure.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So if they pass it on to within their family, the family that is being passed down to could keep the 2 or 3 short-term rental licenses to that one building. However, if they sold it outright outside of the family, if they sold it, then I can understand why the 2 or 3 short-term rental permit licenses would not all transfer. But I'm concerned about keeping it within the family. I think we need to try to find some sort of way to make that happen.
So right now,
Because it's not a transfer. If it's among family, it's not a transfer.
That's correct.
It's
Right?
the limitation on transfers, the one transfer rule. But it sounds like, what I've heard testimony is that some families own these duplex and triplexes. So they've got multiple licenses in the same name. So maybe a simple way to do this, I don't know how many of these are, but have an exception that if it's just that sort of setting, multifamily attached structure, then it's possible for the same licensee to hold multiple licenses. And you don't need a family thing in this at all.
I agree with that.
Because these families want to hold on to it. They don't, you know, the transfer rules are what they are, but they want to be able to hold, 3 licenses for 3 units in a triplex. And this would say you can't do that. So
let's use the example where there's a triplex owned by mom and dad, and mom and dad pass away. It passes to their children. They should be able to keep that duplex or triplex with 2 or 3 short-term rental licenses. That's what I'm saying, basically.
here's something to think about too, an unintended consequence. We found this in Hood River where we wanted to encourage the construction of multifamily dwellings. And you heard tonight some testimony, I think it's true, that one of the best some of the most affordable housing are apartments. And so if you allow multiple, a single entity owning multiple licenses in a multifamily, in an apartment house, you've just kind of knocked out your affordable housing stock. And that's what we found in Hood River, that people were proposing to construct apartment buildings. Each one of them would be short-term rented, which wasn't what Hood River wanted for downtown. They wanted available, affordable, long-term housing.
That is something, yes.
Want to think about that?
That's why this took 18 months.
I don't think I want to think about that.
Every question has this.
I think I would have to drop this conversation at this point. Yeah, because that throws a whole different view on this, and I would be very uncomfortable with that.
Although could we not limit it to duplex or triplex? And exclude apartments?
More than 4 and more.
Right.
The only thing I would caution with, what Dan is saying, and this was the housing element was a conversation we had. If you look at our lotting patterns, our communities, the diversity of housing stock, and if you're trying to balance housing needs and address our housing crisis, we're looking at duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes in many of our areas as that key diverse housing stock. So if you create that competitive field by allowing multiple ownerships, which you can do what you want, it's your program. But it's certainly that unintended consequence of how that may impact housing in the future, we feel is relevant.
Even if that remains within the family, because that's technically, I don't think that's a transfer.
So all.
Mom and dad pass away and the kids inherit it. Is that a transfer?
It is still a transfer by our language, I believe.
Right, but do you exempt it,
Right,
the one
such-
transfer limitation, that's where it's.
Correct, because such STR, so it says, does not apply to ownership transfers. The limitation on STR license transfers with a transfer in ownership of the STR property does not apply to ownership transfers within families, among family members, blah, blah, blah.
So if you die and transfer, by will goes to a family member, I think it would be you're not stuck with this limitation on number of transfers.
But for someone who it's not a family, they own a triplex, they currently have 3 rentals, they can sell that one time. But the new person who buys the house buys 1 short-term rental and 2 non-rentable units in a triplex, non-short-term rentable units in a triplex.
Well, they would have to apply for their own license, and if it's available, they can do it.
But they couldn't because they'd already have 1 if they
Right.
got 1 in the transfer. So they could never rent the other 2 units as short-term. It makes that triplex have 1 short-term rental, 2 family units, 2 long-term rentals, 2 whatever they want to do with the others, but not short-term.
I think my concern here is if it transfers within the family. If they sell it to somebody else, then yeah, if it's a triplex or a duplex with 2 or 3 short-term rental licenses, then it transfers with a single short-term rental license. But if it transfers within a family, then I think they should be able to, and I don't know how but.
So they sell the whole building, all 3 units, 3 licenses.
Yes.
The 3 licenses can transfer, I think.
No, if they sell it, no.
If it's
inherited, I'm hoping we can allow the family members that inherit that duplex or triplex to also inherit the 2 or 3 short-term rental licenses.
As they exist today, but not so that it doesn't exempt them from the 1 license, or it doesn't allow them to continue to add licenses. It's just they get.
Okay, so they're
Does that
still
make sense?
subject to the 1 license per licensee.
So if I may, I would, so on page 7, letter B, which is in section 40, so that's the language for limitation. It might be helpful to take a look at that. So the last sentence, I think this section, I would recommend Mr. Kearns, we work on this just a little bit. The last sentence, I think, almost gets us there, but I think that there needs to be some stronger clarification of what's exempted. If that's the direction you would like to go.
I would think that should be a pretty easy minor change. Bill, are you following?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
So Commissioner Bell, are you on the same page with that?
Well, I'm thinking about, I'm on the same page with what Commissioner Yamamoto is talking about, because I'm thinking about someone in the community who said, I'm operating these short-term rentals as a business, and when I want to retire, if that person were to will their business to their child, then the child would also inherit the licenses. Okay.
That's my thought. Anyway.
That's what we're asking Mr. Kearns and Sarah to language for us, is that.
I'm wondering if perhaps in section 40B, as in boy, we could maybe rework some of that to reflect the desire of the board. So I think that's where that exemption would
Okay,
go.
I would agree with that.
We'll work on it.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioners, I don't mean to interrupt, and I know public
Public
comment's
comment
done.
is over. Thank you, Annie.
But
Thank
we
you.
are talking about it.
Sorry. And I think situations like Annie's are challenging because she's building a business and is intending to sell the business, and those 3 units are the business. And she will have to break that apart in order to sell it. And I think that that's one of the challenges, or a triplex that's being built with those 3. And are we, willing to go that direction? So.
Actually, my problem is he owns
I would agree with you, Sheriff Scar, because a family that owns it is one thing. People that are building a business, an empire, as it were, I think they need to come under slightly different regulations.
Could you address the idea that?
I'm sorry, Joe.
Once we start talking to the public, it gets very messy.
Madam Chair, if I may make a
Yes.
clarification, thank you. So the desire of the board, aside from the exceptions that we've just discussed, is still to limit license holders to 1 per owner. So that piece has not changed.
New license holders.
New license,
correct,
right,
yes.
correct. Moving forward,
Yes.
1 per owner, and that would be anywhere in unincorporated Tillamook County.
Yes.
And that's,
Because I just want to make sure that's how the language reads. It doesn't differentiate between communities or sub-areas, which with the areas outside of the county, they're not part of sub-areas. The language is very general for 1, unincorporated countywide, simply because it would be very difficult for us to pull or differentiate between areas in unincorporated Tillamook County within or outside all of the listed sub-areas. So while we're on this section, just to make sure that that is what you would like to see.
yeah, please.
I'm sorry, Sarah, my mind may have
That's
just
okay. No, it's-
wandered while you were
yeah.
talking, so please rephrase that.
I would be happy to, thank you. Thank you. So if you read section B, 040B, so on page 7 with the highlighted notations, the first sentence reads, and I just want to make sure that this is something you're comfortable with. The county shall issue a maximum of 1 short-term rental license for each qualified licensee.
To me, that's what we've discussed in the past.
For new
What is a new?
licenses. So what that means is we do have families or corporate entities that own multiple short-term rentals throughout the county. Pre-existing. This language would not impact them because they're existing. But what it means is moving forward, it would be 1 per owner licensee. And for those with already multiple licenses, it just means it would not impact them, but they would not be eligible for any more.
So by new, we're talking about if someone sells their property and a new buyer, after the first transfer.
After the first
transfer, a new person who does not yet have a license will be able to apply for 1.
If they're required to. If it's a transfer, right, so if it's an existing license, they get 1 transfer, the way the language reads.
Right.
And if they do not own if they do not have any other licenses in unincorporated Tillamook County, then yes, they would be eligible. But if it's someone who currently owns a rental in unincorporated Tillamook County and wants to buy another rental, transfer or not, they would not be eligible for a license because they already own 1. It would be for a new STR application. The other thing, the transfer, if they have so let's talk about this. If they have their 1 transfer, do you or do you not want that to still apply?
What is that?
Because it means, okay, so if you read this, it says, for purposes of this subsection, it talks about what a licensee is, and this provision applies only to applications for a new license. So just to be clear, if someone already owns a rental and has a license and they want to get another one under a new license, this will not allow them to do it because you're limiting it to one. I just want to make sure moving forward, because that does, this language is limiting. So just want to make sure, in addition, since we're talking about exemptions, are you comfortable with this, how it's been written?
What,
Because I think there's someone who talked today about having a duplex or a triplex that they don't yet have a license for, that they're finishing right now. They would only be able to get one license for that particular building.
That is correct.
Because it would
Even
be
if-
a new license,
Right.
because it would be a new license. Because it is not yet licensed as of the date that this ordinance is adopted.
Correct.
That's what we've discussed in the past. It is.
It is. Since we're talking about it, want to make sure we get it right for you.
No, I agree, and I will share that there's a little heartburn for me, and I totally understand affordable housing is what I'm all about. I don't want us to turn a bunch of duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes into short-term rentals, right? But it is a little challenging to think about a structure that is currently, let's call it a duplex for the example, that is currently a duplex, that currently has short-term rental licenses in both of the units. And when this person goes to sell it, they only get to have, so whoever's gonna buy it can get one license, and yet it's one building.
It's just not fair.
So
No.
it's challenging to think about that piece of it. And I don't know that there's any other way through that, but it is challenging to think about that, particularly when we're trying to make sure that people are not. The whole purpose of one transfer is so that you're not damaged in your sale of the building you have today, because you bought it as a short-term rental. If you bought your duplex or your triplex as a short-term rental with 3 units, when you go to sell it, the whole point of the one transfer is no damage. You've taken away at some level that no damage. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's exactly, yes, that's.
That was the reason for the one transfer, because people bought a transferable license or
Right.
STR, and
But
this
what
gives
we've-
them that.
Yeah, and what we've really done with the one license upon, the one license per owner is that, and applying that to the new owner, is we have potentially applied damage to the person who bought a 3-unit rental, who is only able to truly sell a 1-unit rental. Does that make sense, what my brain's doing? It doesn't necessarily mean my brain's right, but there's some heartburn for me in that piece of it.
So another way to look at this, so if there is a duplex or triplex with 2 or 3 short-term rental licenses already in place, they have one transferable, and one transfer potential. But once that transfer is made, then the new owner has no transfer rights.
Correct.
So, can't we, this is kind of a roundabout way to do this. For current licensed duplexes or triplexes with 2 or 3 short-term rental licenses, can't we allow that single sale to allow both or 3 short-term rental licenses to transfer, knowing that once that is done, then none of the licenses are transferable after that?
Does that
Yeah,
keep people whole?
because when I hear you describe when it's transferable, it means the license goes with the unit.
Right.
It's not a new license.
Right.
It's transferred, and
Yes.
so if you want this 040B that limits it to 1 license per owner, the provision applies only to applications for new STR licenses, not renewals or transfers
Can have that language in there.
that are submitted after the date. So when I say a transfer is not a new license.
Right.
That's
Right.
what I
Right.
thought, and we could make that explicit in
Yes.
here.
Yes.
And would that do the trick?
But once that transfer is done and the licenses transfer,
That's their one.
then
That's their
that's
one.
their
And
one.
then
Then the
the
next sale
triplex
is.
It's open, it could be
yes.
one license.
But
if we're-
also, if they've got a triplex and they transfer it to their kids, and
Then
they transfer it to their kids, and their kids,
I
and their
think
kids,
that needs to keep going.
then
Within
that's a
the family.
transfer, and they would never bump into the limitation on one license per
Right,
owner.
If it stays
So-
within the family.
right.
Okay,
But
okay.
that keeps people who bought a 3-unit rental whole in that first transfer,
Mhm.
that first sale. Does that make sense? Are we on the same page?
I think so.
So a transferred license is not a new license.
Okay, so that does,
Correct.
that does that. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can refine B to include that.
To make that clear,
To make
yeah.
it clear,
Okay.
yeah.
I mean, that's how I read it, but it's obviously not clear to everybody the same way I did.
It was not clear to
I
any
don't
of
get
us.
that.
A lot of this is not clear.
I want to hear from Bill. Are you clear on what we're saying?
Yeah, I think I am.
I think you are.
If you want the existing people who have a triplex or a duplex to be able to, sell at one time to.
Yeah. That's already our thought. They can sell it they have got one transfer.
So at which they bought it. But
Yeah.
ultimately, part of the goal is to remove the golden ticket. It's to remove the forever rental unless it is a family property, which is, used largely for families, historically what we've had. Okay, so the other I threw out there about the date for use it or lose it and the desire to potentially move that so that it doesn't actually start on January of 2024, so that we don't inadvertently begin dumping licenses and replacing them if we're also looking at perhaps a 1 to 2% before we complete the conversations with communities. But rather having that begin perhaps concurrent with the outcome of the conversations with communities. Thoughts?
Okay.
Yeah,
You
I'm
good with that?
I
So
am.
go with, so Sarah, then the question is how, it's about the timeline for conversations with communities, and I know it is our intent to do that as rapidly as possible, but maybe we need to think whether that's June of '24 or January of '25 for the use it or lose it.
Thank you. My recommendation would be January 1, 2025. That gives me a year at least to start. I'm developing a schedule now of community visits and to start that so they can overlap, and I will start them incrementally.
Okay.
So that would at least give me an opportunity to get hopefully the first half done within that timeline.
Okay. That seem reasonable? Okay, thank you, appreciate that.
And we have that noted here in our notes as well.
Okay, we just hadn't really decided what the date would be, and I wanted us to have that before we moved on. Commissioners, are there other questions or comments, things within this ordinance that you would like to discuss? Remove, add?
No more ads.
Just
I'd like to
trying
say
to see
something.
if we're getting there. This is a complex process.
Madam Chair, I do
Yes.
have something else as well.
Yes, please.
Just to be sure, so I am in section 40 still. If you go over to the next page where the caps are to be applied, so there's 21 sub-areas listed. This is, as you know, Tillamook County is very unique that we have several unincorporated communities. Some of these unincorporated communities do not currently have properties with STR licenses. It's mostly some of the inland properties. And also some of the UGBs that are part of the cities do not allow short-term rental use. And some of the cities are going through and updating their processes right now. Are you comfortable with this list? This is the comprehensive list of all of our unincorporated communities. It includes, I'll use Moeller as the example. It's not a community that's close to the ocean or other recreational amenities or a developed community where we would see a lot of vacation rental activity, but taking to heart the comments about being proactive, trying to see into the future. As you know, if this language is adopted by the board, I will be back with proposals for percentages of caps of each of these sub-areas. But is there any of these areas you would like to remove?
And if we remove them, what does that mean?
What that means is they would not be subject to a cap.
Okay.
So if we do start receiving license applications for those communities or sub-areas, there is no growth management tool. The other option would be for some of them, instead of a cap, to apply a distance and density provision. So these areas are defined, they do have defined boundaries, so I could put them in either place. But I added them all just because, it's easier to remove them at this juncture than it is to continue to add. So you do see that comprehensive list.
Yeah.
I'm happy to propose a cap for those that currently don't have any type of a percentage, where we've done the analysis following since 2018 that we've done in other areas. It's up to you.
So I would go with your best thoughts on each one of these areas. If they don't currently have short-term rentals within their area, such as Moeller, take an average of all the other areas that do have, apply an initial cap, knowing that you're going to talk with the communities over the next year and get their views on what they feel their community can handle, and then you bring that back before the Board of Commissioners. But at least they have an initial cap. That, I don't think they would really hit a cap here in that short amount of time. But just in case, I think, using your best judgment on what a cap should be in that area, we're going to go back in and look at each individual area and determine where they should be with their input. Does that make sense?
It does. I'm going back and forth in my head between distance and density because we don't have anything there yet. And I realize in a year, we're not likely to grow a huge amount. So I'm just trying to decide whether distance and density is the best jumping off point or whether a cap is the best jumping off point. And I don't have like an aha moment in that, so I'm still thinking.
And I would offer each of these unincorporated communities are very unique. Some are more urbanized than others. Idaville, for example, your lotting patterns, you have a more densely packed, residentially developed area versus Moeller.
Right.
Which has larger lots, not as, it's a smaller community. Siskiyville, which is up by Alice's, is another area. We could keep them in as a sub-area and work to establish caps, and I am happy to go to these communities as well and continue that work as part of phase 2 to get a better understanding from them. Could come back and recommend a lower cap in some of these areas that have been more traditionally areas where we are seeing people who live and work or that are just simply retired residing in these communities. But that is the list.
Okay.
To your first question, I don't want to remove any of these from the list. And for people who are wondering what we're talking about, in our last meeting, we talked about the communities east of 101 that aren't yet densely populated with STRs, and that we want to do something proactive to make sure that doesn't happen, because that's what's happened in neighboring counties. In Lincoln County, for example, when STRs were limited west of 101, they flooded into the east. And so a lot of the homes east of 101 are where people live, are where locals live, and families purchase those places. And so we don't want all of them to encounter secondarily the same problems that the beachfront communities are having now as an unintended consequence.
Yes.
So for that reason, I would keep this list full.
And then as we look at applying the cap, which at this point we've talked about, should we apply a cap 1% or 2% potentially over what things are today? That would put those communities potentially with a 1% or 2% cap at this time, which would keep us from having a flood inland until we get through the process and make our determinations.
Right.
Makes perfect sense.
Okay, so we will leave them and look at applying the cap process to all of these. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Is there anything else, Sarah, that you wanted to get clarification from us on, or that you wanted to highlight for us that we did not discuss tonight that has been added, or just that you want to make sure that you're clear that we've really thought about it all the way through?
Thank you. I do have one more thing Going to page 19, section 90A, this is when an inspection is required by the county building inspector. And carrying over to at the top of page 20. So serving as the director, the building official, and the STR administrator, had a lot of conversations with my staff, members of the public, neighboring jurisdictions. And everyone has a different approach to entrance and inspection of short-term rentals. And there are some jurisdictions who just leave a lockbox with the key, the inspector goes in and out, nobody needs to be there. I have heard over the years the hardship of some managers or owners to be able to get to the rental for the day, you know, depending on what our inspection schedule looks like, because an inspector may be looking at footings for a foundation, getting ready for a concrete truck, or doing a final inspection on a home somewhere else. So right, we do a variety of inspections every day. And there's been a lot of back and forth about, should someone be required to be there? Should we just wait for the lockbox, enter the home and leave? I am not comfortable with just a lockbox or having an inspector enter and exit a home without a representative of the home there. And it's a few reasons, and probably the biggest one, aside from any, you know, I'm sure if you talk to county council or others, there's you know, those concerns about entering private property without someone there. But for me, it extends beyond that. It's also when a building inspector is there to do an inspection, it's really important that a representative is there walking through the inspection process with the building inspector. That way, if there's any questions that can be answered, you know, it can be done during the inspection. If there's reasons why the inspection does not pass, gives an opportunity for the inspector to counsel the representative of the rental to explain why it did not pass, and then work with them to determine whether the 60-day or the 30-day timeline to correct those non-compliant issues are done. And you know, to me, that language is important. I would request that stay in and that be something, instead of working on a department policy, that we keep that in. It's in the ordinance already. But I just think it's really important that we require somebody to be there when we do those inspections, and I would like that to continue to be codified in the ordinance.
Okay, thank you for that.
Makes sense to me, it does.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. That was just on record, then moving
Okay.
forward, we have that.
Okay. So commissioners, are we ready to take the next step with this, which will be we have provided our guidance to Sarah and to Dan. They will take that between now and next Friday. They will provide for us a final ordinance next Friday, which will be then posted as part of the commissioner's agenda for Wednesday the 19th, which is where we would consider and potentially vote on this ordinance. Are we ready to move to that phase? We're expecting then that we will really just be reviewing the tweaks that we've asked of them tonight. Everything else in here as it stands is what we are looking to put forward for the ordinance, for ordinance 84.
There's one more thing.
Okay, good. I thought when I put the finality on it, it would make our brains go.
The definition of family, I'm thinking about inheritability and the definition of family. So the definition of family, as Dan talked about at the beginning of the meeting, was by blood, by marriage, a third thing. Or adoption. So I don't think that defines family broadly enough for me. So I want people to be able to will their house to someone they love, who they're not necessarily married to or related to or have adopted. So that's important to me.
So we had some conversation, or maybe it was just Sarah and I had some conversation about if the house transfers without payment. Because otherwise, I mean, so it's that whole thing about how is it transferred, right? Is it a will and it's transferred without payment? Or am I just signing an affidavit that says they paid me $450,000, but it's my loved one, so I'm letting them have it. So I think that's where that would have to find some definition and some ability to do that. Is what is the way that we define that?
Yeah, I don't want to create a loophole for people, but I do want to make the definition of family more broad.
So are you getting like domestic partnership, or
Sure.
like I love my business partner a lot?
It's a slippery slope.
Well,
It's, I mean, these are all kind of legal terms. So
Yeah.
domestic partnership is those things, but, you know, the cable guy, I really liked him, loved him over the years. And so like, where do you draw the line from a regulatory perspective?
right.
My cat.
My cat. Well, I would definitely want to include domestic partnerships.
Yeah.
And otherwise, yeah, I don't.
That creates loopholes if you get it too broad.
Because I agree with you. I love when we can use self-defined family.
Mhm.
But in this particular case, it makes it hard for us to regulate when we do that. I mean, from my perspective, it's if inheritance, if you love somebody enough to give it to them,
Mhm.
I'm willing to say they're your family.
Mhm.
You know, but if you love them enough to sell it to them, but you want them to have a license, that's not, now I'm not sure it's the family, right?
Right. So how do we define the giving?
I mean, and does that even work, Dan? Is there any way to do that? So when we say inheritance, that inheritance within that description,
Well, with an inheritance, someone's got to die in this equation.
well, and I think
Right.
that's what we're talking about, right?
That's kind of a
Yeah.
high.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
So we're talking about inheritance. So actually, it says family, well, yeah, what if somebody inherits it who isn't family? Who isn't blood relative or adopted or domestic partner? Upon death.
What if I have a foster child and I will my house to my foster child? I die, the foster child gets it. They haven't purchased it from me.
Under this, they would have to apply for their own license if they want to short-term rent the unit.
So they can get the house, they just don't get the
Yeah,
permit
so you can always do that.
as it exists.
And you mentioned like if they give the property, that's always kind of problematic, because every deed talks about, has a place on it for compensation, and people frequently put in, you know, zero or non-monetary. And so that makes it very difficult to use as a regulatory hook. And then is it fair market value or something else?
Has to match the deed name on the deed.
So any other, yeah, I get where you're going, Commissioner Bell. I'm not sure if we can get there, how we get there. This is why it took 18 months. So we had lots of conversations where it was like, this is what we want to get to, and the question is, can we or how can we? And this is one of those.
Want to think about it?
I definitely want to add domestic partners.
Yeah.
And additionally, let's think about it.
Dan got stuff.
As staff, would it be appropriate for me to continue this conversation with Commissioner Bell? And then Mr. Kearns and I, taking the feedback today, could propose new language or updated, not new, amended language to expand, to address what you would like to see for the ordinance at the July, it's already July, July 19th hearing.
Sure.
You've got lots of time, you have a week and a day, so.
Yeah, we were gonna do it next week. We decided we should give you a little more time than 10 o'clock tomorrow to get this all to me.
Appreciate it. But if that's appropriate, gives you a little bit more time to think, and then I can work with Mr. Kearns, and then we can propose that expanded definition or intent.
Okay.
Okay. One more last call, commissioners. Because we do not want to make substantive changes to this when we talk again on the 19th, because that would require an additional extension. Each time we make what turns out to be substantive changes, we need to repost the ordinance for the public. So we want to make sure that at this point, we're very comfortable that we've given staff guidance on all areas of concern, all areas of change, so that we are comfortable on the 19th that what we are looking at is the final. Yes? Yes?
Yep.
Okay. All right, with that, I think we will thank everyone again for all of their time, all of their attention, all of the heart, all of the agony that's gone into this. We will, as I said, be posting the final draft with our commissioner agenda on Friday, the 14th, I believe it is. I'm sorry, I don't have that in front of me, for the Wednesday meeting, the 19th, for intended approval. We will then take the next step, which is to go deeper into the conversations regarding caps, which will follow on the 19th as well. So, thank you all for being here. We will adjourn this meeting at 7:59.
Good job.
Good job. I know, I'm so sorry about that.
Yeah, Russ, if I know. She started off by saying, well, LLCs are corporations.